Good evening. Michael Tracy here. Breaking news. Boop, boop, boop. There is a new round of Trump-Russia stories just hot off the presses. And whenever new revelations come out or new news come out regarding Trump, Russia, collusion, ties, whatever, I'm reliably inundated with tweets saying, "Hey, look at this. This disproves your skepticism," or "Doesn't this make you look silly?" So it kind of requires that I respond immediately and give my take, or else I could be accused of, I don't know, trying to bury the story or something. I'm not really sure. Either way, the New York Times and the Washington Post have put out new stories tonight. They will be linked in the description box of this video for your convenience. So basically what I did was I read the stories and I distilled my initial thoughts into a tweet. And I just want to kind of go over what I think is most relevant here. The first and most substantive story, I would say, is the finding that Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, may have made a false statement in his Senate testimony on January 10th when he was questioned by Senator Al Franken as to whether he was aware of any contacts between Trump campaign representatives and representatives of the Russian government. Sessions, in that clip, said something that was slightly ambiguous, but the clear indication from him was that he had not had any contacts with Russian officials. And this is a little hazy because Sessions wasn't a formal member of the Trump campaign. He was a sitting senator. He was obviously a very early supporter of Trump's. He was a surrogate for the Trump campaign, but the surrogate position is not well defined. It's pretty nebulous. It can mean just about anything. You could be speaking on a television show and be classified as a campaign surrogate, and then the very next moment you could go back to being just a senator acting in your official capacities. So the point is that the demarcation line between when one is a campaign surrogate and when one is an official acting in official senatorial capacity is unclear. Either way, though, it does appear that as though Sessions did have communications with the Russian ambassador in September of 2016, which would seem to contradict his statement in sworn testimony to Franken. So if Sessions can be found to have willfully stated a falsehood in sworn testimony, then yes, of course, they should be held accountable for that, as should anyone else. The only issue is that the standard for perjury under federal statute is that you have to willfully make a false claim or make a false statement. And I think there's a way for Sessions and his defenders to parse what he said as meant to reflect only that in his capacity as a Trump surrogate, did he not have communications or contact with any Russian officials, whereas in his capacity as a senator, yeah, he would have contacts with all kinds of foreign officials over the course of his normal duties. But I think it's arguable either way. I think I don't know whether he actively intended to lie here. I'm open to that prospect. I would tend to doubt that he did willfully lie about something that could be so easily disproven. I mean, he is a lawyer. He's now the Attorney General. But again, I'm open to varying interpretations of that. So I guess I'll reserve judgment at this point. And so whether or not, and I think this is an important aspect of this, whether or not Sessions is found to have committed perjury or did something improper, that wouldn't make the underlying offense, speaking to a Russian ambassador, somehow sinister. It wouldn't necessarily be confirmation of the more grandiose characterizations of the Russia-Trump relationship that a lot of partisan Democrats have been harping on for a long time now. What it would be mostly, I think, and this was the case with Mike Flynn, who resigned as National Security Advisor recently. Excuse me. I think it would more be evidence of political ineptitude, which I think Flynn was definitely guilty of, and Sessions may well be guilty of. To me, political ineptitude or incompetence or just chaos is a more plausible explanation for much of what's happened than any kind of conspiracy or sinister motive. Now, given that there already are the beginnings of congressional investigations underway into the Trump-Russia issue, I think it's pretty clear now that Sessions can't be viewed as an impartial arbiter of those investigations. So, to the extent that there are investigations in Congress happening, right? But there's also going to be some kind of But to the extent that Sessions is overseeing the FBI investigation, he can't be seen as an impartial arbiter of that, and probably couldn't have been seen as that even prior to tonight. So probably should recuse himself. But again, this investigation was probably going to be a shit show either way, whether or not Sessions recused himself. So that's always been my worry, and that's, I think, been the worry of most skeptics of the prevailing narrative on this Russia stuff. It's not that we're opposed on principle to investigation. It's that it's obvious that any investigation is going to descend into just Russia baiting and fear-mongering, and we are in conspiracy theorizing. So, and we've already seen much of that. But given that investigations are inevitable at this point, Sessions should not be presiding over it, I don't think. Elements of the deep state, I think, are clearly still on the warpath against Trump. They are responsible, evidently, for much of the leaking here to their favorite publications, the New York Times and the Washington Post. That doesn't exculpate Sessions for potentially making a false statement to Congress or in a Senate hearing, but I think it is needed context. Just that the reason that we're getting this information is because there are factions who are hostile to Trump and want to further this Russian narrative, who are flooding the media with leaks. Again, leaks are good in their own right, but I think it's just something to bear in mind. And then the more overarching point, I think, is that Sessions is somebody who I would have definitely opposed as becoming Attorney General, but I wouldn't have opposed him for anything that had to do with whether or not he spoke to a Russian ambassador in September of 2016. I would have opposed him because he has retrograde views on the drug war. He's in favor of civil forfeiture laws. He obviously has some a touchy history on race and race relations, and he's just not somebody who I would want to see who I would want to be presiding over the federal legal apparatus. But the fact that people are most incensed, apparently, about his communications with a Russian ambassador, I think, just speaks to the distortion of priorities that we're seeing in how the Trump administration is being viewed. So that's it for now. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about on this score soon. Go read those stories for yourself if you so please, and let me know what you think. All right, talk to you later.